So we can model this. And over on the right-hand side of the board, I'm going to draw what should happen during meiosis. So for mom, mom has 2 X chromosomes, right? Like that. After meiosis 1, there are 2 haploid daughter cells. Like that, right? Isn't that what should happen? Mm-hmm. And then what happens right here between meiosis 1 and meiosis 2? Yeah, those chromosomes split apart, right? And the sister chromatid goes into each daughter cell. So that we should get this, that, and that, right? Isn't that right? So this is meiosis 1. And this is meiosis 2. Dad's the same thing. Dad has an X chromosome, and he has a small little Y chromosome. So at meiosis 1, what should we get right here? X chromosome, sure. Which means that in here, the Y chromosome. And then the same thing for meiosis 2, right? Those sister chromatids are going to segregate so that you get sister chromatids segregating like that. So that's normal meiosis. So let's consider this right here. 3 X chromosomes. Whose fault is that? Is that mom or dad's? Mom's. Which is the obvious conclusion, right? There's an extra X chromosome. So who gave that up? Mom or dad? Mom could have. Could dad have given up an extra X chromosome? Yeah, because he has an X chromosome to give up. If it's dad's fault, where did that non-disjunction event occur? Meiosis 1 or meiosis 2? It has to be meiosis 2, right? Because if there's a non-disjunction event that occurs between meiosis 1 and the original mother cell, that cell is going to look something like this, right? Or that meiotic event would be something like this. If there's a non-disjunction event that occurs here, what's this cell going to inherit? Both. An X and a Y, and this is going to inherit nothing. Segregation didn't occur correctly, right? We didn't have the completion of the mitotic spindle, so those 2 homologous chromosomes weren't separated from each other. So that when dad produces sperm cells, they'll look like this, right? The X chromosome, Y chromosome, X chromosome, Y chromosome. So if meiosis 1 occurs correctly, and it's dad's fault, that means that the problem has to occur in meiosis 2, and that makes sense to us as well, right? So we get a Y chromosome segregated here. So if a non-disjunction event occurs in meiosis 2, and there's an extra X chromosome inherited from dad, we know that it has to occur right here. So what does this non-disjunction event look like? What would this inherit? Yeah, both sister chromatids. And this would inherit nothing. So if this is a sperm cell, right, and this sperm cell fertilizes that egg cell of mom's, that's going to be an X from mom and 2 X's from dad, right? So this could definitely be dad's fault, and if it's dad's fault, the non-disjunction event occurs at meiosis 2. If it's mom's fault, where did that non-disjunction event occur? Could be meiosis 1, or it could be meiosis 2, right? Because if it occurs in meiosis 1, what that looks like is this. So instead of mom inheriting or passing one X chromosome into both, she passes two X chromosomes into one and nothing into the other, right? Which means that these egg cells aren't going to inherit an X chromosome, but each of these will inherit two X chromosomes. So if this normal sperm cell from dad fertilizes that egg cell, it's going to be XX. So it could occur at meiosis 1 if we wanted, or it could occur at meiosis 2, right, as well. Because if this occurred correctly, we could still get a non-disjunction event right there. And if this sperm cell fertilized that egg cell, we would get XXX. Okay, so what? If the genotype is 3 X chromosomes, that could be either mom's or dad's fault. If it's dad's fault, we know that non-disjunction event has to occur at meiosis 2. If it's mom's fault, it could occur at either meiosis 1 or meiosis 2. You guys, on the final, I'm really likely to ask you to present you with one of these genotypes and say, whose fault is it? And if it's this parent's fault, where did the non-disjunction event occur? And more than memorizing where these non-disjunction events occur, if it's a particular parent's fault, I want you really to understand the process that we're using to figure that out. That ultimately will be more valuable to you. Let's consider this one. XXY. Mom's or dad's fault? What's that? What's that? Yeah, it definitely could be the dad's fault. But it could also be the mom's fault, right? Because there are two X's and a Y. If it's dad's fault, where does that non-disjunction event have to occur? It has to be meiosis 1, right? Because with meiosis 1, what's going to happen is one cell is going to inherit both the X and the Y. And that's the only way you can get XY combination, which means that each of those sperm cells will inherit an X and a Y. So if this sperm cell fertilizes that egg cell, then it's going to be XXY, right? If it's mom's fault, and really it could be, right, because we have an extra X chromosome here. If it's mom's fault, where does that non-disjunction event occur?
Meiosis 2.
Could be 2. Could also be 1, yeah. You can get an extra X chromosome from the non-disjunction event, either place for mom. Okay, how about this one? Extra Y chromosome. That can only be dad, right? Because he's the only one that can give up an extra Y chromosome. Where does that occur? Yeah, you're right, Sophia. It's meiosis 2, right? It has to be meiosis 2. Because this is the only place where we can get 2 Y chromosomes in the same cell. Mom can't give an extra Y. It can only be dad. Questions? Yeah,
So I
Sophia.
bet like, well, this isn't a question, but I bet like, if two short parents,
Mm-hmm.
the dad probably thought the mom was cheating, if it was XXX or XY.
X, Y, and Y, yeah, right? And then they have a son that's like huge. Yeah, that would be my logical conclusion. Okay, are non-disjunction events somewhat clear? Do we kind of understand them? Okay. What's really interesting is that with some non-disjunction events, like trisomy 21, there is a positive correlation between the probability of the event and the age of the mother. So what we see is mothers who are hopefully not down here in their teens, but let's say like early 20s, there is a very low probability of that non-disjunction event occurs. But as we increase in age, we see a significant positive correlation between age of the mother and probability of having a child with Down syndrome. And this is what that karyotype looks like. You'll notice that at that 21st spot, there are 3 chromosomes. Why would that be so? Why would females who are older be more likely to have a child with Down syndrome than those that are younger?
Because their eggs are like, they're like not the best eggs.
They're all old and shriveled up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think you guys have been told since like high school is that you're born with all of the eggs you will ever produce. And I can tell you that that is false. It is absolutely false. You're born with all of the cells that ultimately will produce egg cells. That might be true. But you have no egg cells. You have no egg cells until you start going through puberty, when you actually start the menstrual and ovulation cycles. Now, if you think about it, every month, unfortunately, from the time you're an early teen until you hit menopause, right, you go through this cycle, and your body is constantly going through meiotic divisions to produce egg cells. That is metabolically an expensive activity because you're pulling chromosomes around, and you're dissolving cellular constituents, and you're making new ones. And it gets to a point where individuals are so old that that cellular machinery that's performing all of those tasks begins to break down. It's not necessarily a product of the age of the cell, more an age of the individual, because cellular mechanics, as we know, is a product of senescence, just begin to break down. Sarai, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So when females get, like sometimes when they don't have a lot of eggs, they like go through they freeze their eggs.
Uh-huh.
How does that, do they age too? Like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. So women that are contending with infertility,
Yeah.
for example, yeah. And so when that happens, right, they actually remove eggs, and they'll generally remove a clutch, like a whole batch of eggs, and they'll cryogenically freeze them. And that just puts them in arrested development in perpetuity. And there really isn't a significant lifespan to those. Like, they live for a really, really long time.
So if the woman is like in her 40s, will she still have the same chance of having like the same percentage?
Yeah, if her eggs are extracted when she is 40,
Yeah.
then yes.
Okay.
Because you really are, you're taking the actual egg, not the cell that's developing into the egg, right? Yeah, good question.
But
Which,
sperm is like forever good.
not really. I mean, though guys would like you to believe that, it's not true.
Well, like,
Forever good.
cause like, my boyfriend's dad is 60 and he just had a baby.
Yeah, so the difference is this, right? Every month, how many egg cells do y'all produce, you women? 1, right? But guys, how many sperm cells do they produce? A lot, right? And the probability of a faulty sperm cell fertilizing an egg cell is much less given the quantity of sperm cells that are produced. So even though meiotic problems might occur, like later in life for guys, there's still enough production of healthy sperm cells that old men can have babies pretty easily. It's just a product of quantity, definitely not quality.
So
Yeah.
is infertility, oh sorry, did
That's
I
okay.
interrupt someone? Is infertility like usually a cause of like something on the mother's side rather than the father's side?
I don't know what the relative proportion of female and male infertility is. I think that male infertility is generally a product of testosterone production, which can be medicinally corrected. Like you can take T supplements.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what the relative proportion of each is. Amory, did you have a question?
Yeah, so like, with like, since women produce like less, is that why like when women donate eggs, they get so much money for it?
Probably, yeah. It probably is. Plus, the process of donating an egg is much more invasive than the process of donating sperm. Yeah. Okay. So back to Sarai's question, and this has absolutely nothing to do with genetics, but do you guys know what stem cells are?
Yeah.
So stem cells are used a lot in, well, some stem cells are used in research, And stem cells are cool, right? Because stem cells have the ability to develop into true embryonic stem cells, that is, have the ability to develop into any other kind of cell in our body. If we were to take a skin cell, it could only become another skin cell. If we were to take an eye cell, it could really only become another eye cell because it's been differentiated. That is, back to the cellular mechanics, genes have been methylated. And so there are only specific genes active in our skin cells. Because of that deactivation, those skin cells can only produce more skin cells. But early in embryonic development, those cells in embryo have the potential to become anything else in our body, which is a really, really cool phenomenon, right? What that means is, the potential is this. We could take, like, stem cells, and we could cause them to become, like, new neural tissue for individuals that are contending with, like, Alzheimer's or some neurodegenerative disorder. But the problem is what? What's the real controversy surrounding embryonic stem cells?
Like abortion.
Yeah, so the problem is they truly have the potential to become individuals. The question is, what's the source of embryonic stem cells? Embryos. That's the source, right? I mean, if it's an embryonic stem cell, it came from embryos. And the question is, where do we get those embryos? And the answer is through in vitro fertilization. So what happens, right, is women and men who are contending with infertility go to the doctor, the women donate an egg, the males donate some sperm, and then outside the body, we get a zygote created. The doctor takes some of the sperm and he mixes it with the egg cell, and there's fertilization that occurs. And then at that point, the zygote is frozen. And then the woman comes in when she's ready, and those zygotes are implanted. Now, generally speaking, my sister did this, generally speaking, they'll extract like 24 egg cells. They'll get a whole bunch. And then they'll fertilize a whole bunch, but they'll only implant like 5 or 6 at a time. So you go in for your first treatment, you get 5 or 6 implanted, and for my sister, 2 of them developed. So she has twins, fraternal twins, but she has twins. The question is, 5 of her 25 eggs were implanted. What does she do with the remaining 20?